Whenever you buy a sample pack on Loop Cloud or a sample from Splice or something like that, what you do is you help yourself to get out of your old ways by implementing some new, innovative, crazy ideas that you would have never come up with otherwise, and you support an artist, so that is a great deal. However, that is not the case for drum and bass snares, unfortunately, especially if we're talking about modern dance floor drum and bass tracks. Oh my god, there's like zero samples that work. Okay, I could possibly make the case for Matt Zoll's sample pack and Teddy Killer's sample packs. Those two are really good. However, some of the samples are a little bit either too techy or a little bit too over-the-top heavy, but still they're pretty good. But most other producers who made their sample packs for Splice, I mean, they either work for a company and they don't have huge release back catalog, or they are semi-pro YouTubers who have a huge following. So just think about this for a second. If I were a CEO at Splice, which of those two things would be better for my business? So, number one, I'm going to get really high quality, super cool musical producers who are going to make the best samples possible for every single genre, including drum bass artists of the highest tier that make the best snares, right? And then I'm going to rely on my own advertising of the service, or I'm gonna get some cool YouTubers who have overall together like 3 million potential buyers, and they're going to make sample packs for me. And I think the answer is obvious. You want to make more money, and this is where the market comes into play. A lot of people who release their sample packs with Splice, they do not necessarily specialize even in the genre that they're making samples for. So I decided to make this video in hopes that I was going to fix the problem for you. You know, creating your own snares may be complicated, but that is exactly what separates you from those Splice snares, you know. So yeah, let's get started. I mean, this demo is pretty raw, but it's just something that I decided to make to place the snare that we're going to make in the context of an actual half-finished song. But yeah, let's just give it a go. This is not something I was going to finish or anything. I just made it for this video. This is clearly like a pendulum influence, but we're looking at the snare like this. So let's start a fresh project and get on the snare. So we will need a few serum instances, and first thing that we want to do is create a analog sine wave click. We can do that by selecting an analog sine wave wavetable and adding a few LFOs. One of them is going to be on the level, so we get something like this. We want it to be really fast, and we want to make sure that we have zero phase randomness. Then we want two LFOs on the coarse pitch with a monopolar mode. To make a monopolar mode, you have to click Shift and Alt and click here once. What it does is it only makes a pitch modulation from one direction. Otherwise, it's going to sound really dirty. We don't want that. We only want that little laser effect here, but we want it to be really fast, so it would be barely noticeable. But to make it a little bit more clicky and like fast, I'm gonna add another LFO right here, and yeah. It has to be really fast too. So now we have like a sine attack is what we can call it. And I'm going to put it on a separate mixer track. There may be a little bit too much low end. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove that. Because after this, we're going to make a fundamental punch of the snare. And that layer needs a lot of space in the low end. So we want to make sure that there is no problem. And let's actually do that right now, because I think the click is fine. Just gonna make sure it's a little bit louder in the mix. Something like this is fine for now. And this is going to be called a fundamental punch. So I'm gonna put it on a separate mixer track right here. And I like F key, so I'm gonna go 5 semitones up and 1 octave lower, because we want our snare to be lower. And that is the punch that we're looking for. And we want to make sure that it's really short, something like this. So you have an LFO on the volume of the fundamental punch, but you have to make sure that there is a little bit of space for that click in the beginning, because otherwise they are going to clash together and the snare is not going to sound as definitive as we want it to be. And this is where the hard part kicks in, because a lot of people do a mistake of not analyzing the wavetable when they do that. And they make either like too much a space or they are too close to each other and it sucks. So for this, I have Smart Electronics SM Exoscope, which is like my favorite plugin for wavetable research. And you can see that there is some dirt going on right here. And that is because I didn't turn off the phase randomness on the fundamental punch. And as soon as I do that, it is the same every single time. So now what we want to do is we want to make a small pre-delay, but not really big. Something like this. So it's fine for now that there is like a little space there, but we're going to fill it with a second attack that I'm going to introduce. It's going to be a white noise click. So it's going to be called a noise attack. This layer is the most important to make your sample cut through in the mix. And people, like a lot of tutorials out there, they're not showing you that you have to do that. Actually, I don't know if I've ever seen one where they show you that you should do that. Usually people say like, oh, let the click cut through and then the fundamental punch, but you can actually layer the click. You can make a sine wave click and a white noise click, and they work together perfectly well. No problem at all. So what you can do here is you can make a white noise like this, but guys, don't forget, if you layer multiple white noises together, change phase a little bit, because otherwise you might run into phase issues. So we need this fast click like that. Super duper fast. No need to cut off any low end or anything. And that's what we get. Usually this sound is a little bit more quiet. It's only like for technical purposes. You cannot actually definitively hear this white noise in the mix. Like when you play the song, you do not hear that. But it's there because it's going to make your whole snare much brighter. This is why we use this. So I'm going to add another layer, which is going to bring our snare to life. And that is a white noise tail that I want to use a bright white noise for. I'm going to change the phase just in case. And this is where we start to hear the actual snare. A lot of people, what they do at this point is they start cutting out the low information from the snare. And I would not recommend you that. Instead, I'm going to call this a noise tail. Instead, what you can do is you can add a really cool reverb, which adds some of that grit. It kind of combines all that information in the low end and makes your snare sound really powerful and industrial. So my favorite one for this is Valhalla Room. If you remove a little bit of depth, make the decay shorts, and tone down the mix, you will hear how amazing the snare tail sounds. So yeah, this is one of my favorite methods of making snare tails. At this point, what we really want to make sure is that, you know, the snare is actually beautiful on the echoscope. And that's exactly what I was talking about. So you can see that there is like a small problem here. Like we have a fast attack, then there's like something, like there's like some emptiness before the fundamental punch. And fundamental punch, I mean this low end information. So there is some problem there. And we need to make sure that that is taken care of. So we're going to go back to the fundamental punch layer, open the wavetable information, and we're going to make... Yes, you can see. So I put it a little bit closer to the attack, and right away we can see that the picture is beautiful. And maybe, you know, you're losing a little bit of power because of that, but you can always add a little bit of loudness on your sine attack or on your noise attack. Noise attack sounds a little bit off, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make it shorter, like super duper short. Ah, yes, now it's more powerful. So now this is where you can hear the difference without noise attack and with it. So you can see it starts to come alive. Beautiful. Next thing we want to do is we want to add limiter on the master channel. Aha! What we see here is that our fundamental, not the fundamental, but our click is too loud. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make the click quieter. Yes, now it looks a little bit more professional. And another thing I want to add right now into this snare is one more noise tail, but this one is going to be more clean and more bright. So this one is more industrial and dirty, but noise tail 2 is going to be a little bit more bright. So we're gonna add like a fast high pass white noise, changing the phase, don't forget. Something like this. And in this one, we will remove a lot of low end because we're not going to apply any sort of reverb here. So trying to do something like this to make the whole snare more powerful. Maybe a little bit earlier the attack should be. Perfect. That sounds pretty decent. The only thing that I feel that should be changed a little bit right now is the amount of reverb on the tail. It's a little bit too it's a little bit too long, so I'm gonna make it short, like super short. Yeah, sounds pretty good. So fundamental punch, I don't like when it's too like loud, but it doesn't feel like it's too loud in this particular situation. So I'm gonna put it to -6 or -7, which is where I normally like this is my limit, and then we're gonna make the tails a lot louder. So I'm gonna make FL Studio a little bit more quiet right now because the snares are gonna be punchy. Yes, you can hear that. And also, going back to the first noise tail layer, now I can actually remove a little bit of the grit in the low end, just to make sure that snare sounds better to my ear, and maybe make this tail a little bit shorter as well. So now it's a matter of you can do whatever you want. You can move the you can move the noise tail around, make it a little bit, yeah, make it the attack begin a little bit faster on the noise tail. And also, the fundamental punch, it's a little bit too long. I can hear the sine wave too long, like the whole key. So I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter. And the noise tail, I mean, the second tail, I think I want to make it a little bit longer and shorter, like this. So longer and shorter, well, that's contradictive, but I mean longer like intro and a little bit longer like release, but it's a little bit quieter. Something like that. Maybe we can play around with the pitch. Oh, that's pretty good. And there you go. We have a pretty decent snare. Now we have to look at the picture. It doesn't look all too bad. And maybe adding a little bit of noise attack. We will see. Maybe that will help. So this layer here, I like to play around with it in the very end when I finish my snare, just to make sure it's in the right spot, but it looks fine. All those snare tails, make sure you have envelope mode turned on, because otherwise they're going to play infinitely. We don't want that. And after that, we're going to make that little pre-shift with white noise. So this is like super simple. you open a separate instance of Serum like this, and you make a really short, barely noticeable pre-shift. It's like super small, but it's gonna make your snare punch a little bit better. So you put it right before your snare. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I offer you an option. You see right here, I'm going to make it a little bit longer. And the punch changes. You can do that. That is an option. For this particular snare, I feel like I'm not going to use it, actually. It sounds pretty good as it is, but that is a really good, that is really good. I like all of the snares that I made for my new sample packs. I actually had a pre-shift click. Or this one, which is the one that I'm using in one of my tracks. So they have that pre-shift. This is why they are so powerful. But yeah, now we're going to make like the last adjustments to make the snare even louder and more punchier. So I'm going to add a wave shaper. And I'm going to make sure that our fundamental is not too loud. And I'm going to make sure that our noise attack is not too loud. But my noise tails, I want them a little bit louder. Actually, noise attack, I miss it now. I need it. So it's a little bit better, but yeah, need to make sure that, you know, those tails, like the dirty one, it's kind of difficult to put it in mix. So you need to make sure that it's properly long. It shouldn't be too long. I think I made it too long, actually. And properly loud. Shouldn't be that loud. Sounds better. And let's see. Something like that. Now, maybe you can play around with loudness more, and maybe you can play around with pitch. Sounds pretty decent. This is how the snare sounds, and this is how the new snare sounds with all the effects. It's definitely a different snare, but also one thing that I didn't mention is that those snares from my sample pack, they have multiple layers on top of them. So what we can do right now is we can go up to any random sample pack, like deep house sample pack, get a snare like that, and we can put it on top of it. However, make sure to cut out the low ends because it's going to make a big conflict. So we want to avoid that. So yeah, you can see I can make infinite amount of snares like that. One thing I like more than that is to actually use my own snares. So I'm going to take a snare like this, for example. Yeah. So it adds some value to the snare. And you can render it. It's a decent snare. So I hope that you enjoyed this video, and in the future I'm going to make more video about kick drums and everything like build-ups, drops. You're going to learn the whole structure of making a modern dance floor song, and you don't have to worry about that. But for me to make these videos more often, please make sure to leave comments, help me on my delivery, help me on content, give me ideas, like, share the videos, and subscribe to the channel. And the more you do that, the sooner I'm going to release the next one. See you around.